Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's Kai LeVeo. I like to shout out China Observer for this video. Hopefully they don't flag this. I like to do a partnership because I'm always looking at their videos. I'm just doing reviews. And these are my thoughts of it. Vietnamese brides looking in China to find love and a better life. The grass ain't always greener on the other side, or is it? That's just like us Americans, or should I say passport bros, going overseas to think that we're gonna find better. And it's pretty much the same thing with neighboring Asian countries, because you have the third world Asian countries, then you have the first world Asian countries like China and Japan. But anyway, let's get into it.
Why do Vietnamese girls leave after marrying into China? Well, you see, Vietnamese girls dream of marrying into China, but once they get here, they find that things often don't go as planned. The difference in lifestyle are just too big. Chinese is recognized as one of the hardest languages in the world to learn, and for these Vietnamese women, learning Mandarin and Chinese characters is their biggest challenge. On top of that, dealing with the various local dialects, making things even harder. It's tough for them to communicate and build relationships. Also, many Vietnamese girls end up living in remote mountainous areas of China, like Yunnan, Huizhou, or Sichuan. They find these places to be even less comfortable than their hometowns.
And you gotta remember, when China's spoken about in the media, all they're showing is the large cities, like Shenzhou, Hong Kong. We all know about Hong Kong. That's the capital, right? And then there's a lot of other cities, these metropolitan cities with large skyscrapers, right? That kind of look like back home in America, right? But you got to realize there's also rural parts that aren't really developed. And it's the same here in America. In the Midwest, it's not as developed as it is on the West Coast and the East Coast. And that's pretty much how you got to look at it here. Now, see, Vietnam is much smaller than China. China is like its whole universe almost. Like China and Russia are the two biggest countries. But anyway,
This reality is a harsh blow to them, whether it's the economic pressure or the living conditions. The difference between what they saw about China online and what they experience in real life is massive. This becomes the main reason they choose to leave. Since the 1980s, there have been many Vietnamese women who have chosen to marry Chinese men. This trend has helped ease the problem of Chinese men struggling to find wives. There are a few reasons behind this. China has more men than women, while Vietnam has more women than men. Also, China's economy is more developed compared to Vietnam's. Some Vietnamese women see marrying into China as a chance for a better life and more opportunities.
a 3 Series BMW in a luxury apartment. It's the same thing in America. They all want the same thing, right? I mean, that's most women, not just Chinese and Asian women, but in general, that's what they're looking towards. All you see is these luxury apartments, 3 Series BMW, maybe even a G-Wagon. But just the upscale life. If they married the right high earning man, they could get all this stuff without really working.
However, things don't always turn out as they hope. Some Vietnamese women return to their home country just months or years after moving to China. Cultural differences, language barriers, and different living environments are big challenges for them. These, along with economic pressure, often lead to disappointment and pain, prompting many to leave. The women in the video also mention differences in eating habits. Their tastes are quite different from those in China. While Chinese food uses many seasoning, Vietnamese food is lighter and focuses on natural flavor. Many Vietnamese women believe that marrying into a foreign family would mean better living conditions, but after arriving in China, they realized the reality was not what they had imagined. This is another reason why some choose to leave. Another issue is that some Vietnamese brides were trafficked into China against their will. Others are involved in marriage scams. They partner with intermediaries to target families desperate for marriage. After agreeing on a price, they quickly marry into the family. Then they find ways to take the family's money. Once they've nearly drained their finances, they flee into the dead of night. Sometimes they even leave their children behind. Then they target another family. This is heartbreaking, especially for families that are already struggling. They hope to avoid high bride prices and housing costs, but end up losing both money and family.
Damn.
A woman shared her experience from around 2010 or 2011. Many Vietnamese women married into remote rural areas in China hoping for a better life, but they found that life didn't improve.
Did you hear what she just said? They were marrying into rural areas. People in rural areas don't have a lot of money. I'm sure a lot of them want to leave the rural area if they haven't been there their whole life, but basically it's just not the place to be. But if you were born there, that's what you're used to. Or if you're into entertainment and you see the luxury lifestyle you see of America or other parts of China, then yeah, you're gonna want that lifestyle. So yeah, if you marry somebody that lives in the rural area and you move to that rural area, you're gonna struggle just like him. It's not like you marry somebody that lived in the city.
Much. In some cases, it was even harder. Many Vietnamese brides choose to leave after having children, while some left before giving birth. She mentioned that in her hometown, at least 200 Vietnamese women were married into the area. Now only a few remain. In one village, there were about 20 Vietnamese brides, but now only 2 or 3 are left. Transportation in these areas is poor. The Vietnamese women saved up for a plane ticket and left. In these places, men spent their life savings, around 50,000 to 60,000 yuan, to bring a bride home.
That's messed up. You save up money for a dowry, and whoever you marry, they still leave you. Damn, that has to hurt. While you saved up your money to marry a girl, she saved her own money so then she could leave and go back to her home country. That's crazy.
These men are often older and not wealthy. The language barrier adds to the problem, leading many Vietnamese brides to leave. This is a complex social issue. She recalled a particularly sad story. Two
Oh,
Chinese
she
men
looked
spent
pissed.
hundreds of thousands
Jesus.
of yuan to.
Woo, she looked pissed. Damn. Sorry, I have to stop her right there. I'm just looking at her. I'm just studying her face. Like, damn. She looked like the kind that'll put your finger in her face.
Married two Vietnamese brides. After losing
Look at
200
that
yuan for
cash.
travel expenses, they had to walk home. It took 3 to 4 hours to cover the 15 kilometers. She watched as the two Vietnamese brides cried. It was truly heartbreaking. There are several reasons why these Vietnamese brides choose to leave. Number one, the huge gap between reality and expectation has caused them significant psychological distress. Some Vietnamese women who married into China had never been there before. They didn't know what life in China was actually like. They had heard that China was wealthier than Vietnam and thought marrying a Chinese man would bring them a better life. But in reality, it was different. Many were sent to remote rural areas in China. The living conditions were nothing like the bustling cities they had imagined.
So they tried to marry their way out of poverty from their own country just to go to another country's poverty and pretty much live a worse life because they got married. They were living a life that they didn't expect to live while being married.
These women hoped for a better life but found that things weren't much different from the poverty they had left behind. This led to a huge psychological gap for them. They felt it was better to return to their home country than to continue living this way.
Wow.
Number two, some Vietnamese women find that their husbands do not treat them well after marrying into China, leading to an unhappy life. Some Vietnamese women willingly married into China hoping for happiness, love, and a stable life, but they often face coldness and mistreatment from their husband and in laws.
And see, this goes on so much that it's not really talked about a lot. At least not in America. We don't know. I mean, all we know is the Asian people we see in well, I'm in the Bay Area in California. So for me, San Francisco, the East Bay, I live in the East Bay. There's a lot of Asians over here as well, especially in the burbs. I'm in the burbs, so, everybody's pretty much in tech and nurses or whatever. So I see something different than what I'm seeing on these videos. Of course, because I haven't been there yet, but I have the passport and I can go there. That's the difference. But I wouldn't go there as a passport, bro, though, because I know what I'm getting into. Because when you marry somebody, you marrying the whole family and their friends, which pretty much you're going to have to deal with. Because once you marry somebody, especially a foreigner, you don't know who's going to try to move in on you. They say they're only coming for a few weeks, but the next thing you know, the person you married went behind your back and signed legal documents for them to stay. And next thing you know, you're one big happy family.
Living in a foreign place made them feel lonely and helpless. This made their lives unhappy and reduced their sense of well-being. In
Ooh.
the end, many choose to leave China and go back to their homeland. Number three, they were trafficked and sold into China. Some Vietnamese women were not willing brides. They were forced into these marriages. They came from poor, remote villages in Vietnam and fell into traps by fraudsters. These criminals lured them into China's remote areas with false jobs.
And a lot of these people end up in prostitution too. That's what they're not saying too. That's what a lot of the traps are. They get trafficked in, and this happens even in Japan too. They're not talking about Japan in this video, but they end up all over that vicinity of Asian countries. Like they get trafficked in. So don't assume when you go to these countries, if you go to Japan, everybody's Japanese. That's not true because there's a lot of Koreans that are in Japan too. There's a lot of Koreans that are going to school in Japan. So are they there by choice or did something else happen? See, and for everybody that says, oh, it's all the same, no, it's not the same. It's not the same. Especially there's a language barrier. You were trafficked in from your own country to another country and you don't know the language.
Offers. Once there, they are married off to older, poor, and sometimes physically disabled or mentally challenged rural men.
Whoa.
For these women, marrying to China felt like bowling into a living hell. Their lives were full of suffering. When they had the chance, they often chose to escape to free themselves from this hopeless life. Chinese media reported on a man from Dawu County in Hubei province in early April 2023. He paid around 77,000 yuan, which is around 10,600 US dollars, through an arranged introduction to marry a Vietnamese woman. His family was hopeful that this marriage would finally bring stability and happiness. However, just 7 days after the wedding, the bride suddenly left without a word. Dawu County is a mountainous region in northeastern Hubei. It has seen many cases of marriage fraud involving Vietnamese brides in recent years. On February 16, 2016, several villages in Meishan Township and Jingtao Town, Fujian Province, saw a mass disappearance of Vietnamese brides. More than a dozen brides went missing. Most of them do speak
Whoa.
Mandarin. Some had been married for about 6 months, while others for less than a month. They disappeared using excuses like going out to buy clothes, groceries, or use the restroom. Their phones went unanswered. Husband found out they had all vanished around the same time. Some of these Vietnamese brides were even pregnant. Many villagers said that they were introduced to their Vietnamese brides by an intermediary from Tong An, Xiamen. This intermediary had also come from Vietnam and had lived in Tong An for more than 10 years. After the Vietnamese brides disappeared, the intermediary's phone was also unreachable. In Jingtao Town Central's village, a 29-year-old man named Feng Xiaojun was one of the husbands of a missing Vietnamese bride. He said he married a woman named Nguyen Thieu Yen.
And see, the thing is, I'm hearing a lot of talk about Chinese men, they're toxic towards women, or, you know, this is pretty relatable to the passport bros here in America. They're saying, okay, nobody wants you in your own country. What makes you think those girls in those countries don't have anybody and they want you? So it's pretty much what it's sounding like here. It's the same thing, but I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So that's pretty bad if nobody in your own country wants you or you can't find anybody. Both the United States and China are large countries, so there's somebody for everybody, right? I mean, some people aren't looking, some people are waiting for that person to come to them, or sometimes a person can be right in front of you and you don't know it. Or if you're just really looking for an upgrade. But see, here in the United States, a lot of men are looking for mothers. They're not looking for wives. They're looking for somebody that they can lean on, which in return, the woman is looking for a man to lean on instead of the man leaning on her. Now, the 50-50 thing, they don't talk about this shit in the Asian cultures. There is no 50-50. It's more like 80-20.
From Vietnam. He paid a bride price of 50,000 yuan. He brought her home without a wedding ceremony or marriage certificate.
Oh.
He said, my wife couldn't speak the Hokkien dialect but could speak Mandarin. I saw her ID card, but it was in Vietnamese, so I couldn't understand it. I only know she was born in 1990.
So if she was born in 1990, it's 2024, so she's 34. So they're not talking about leftover women in this video, which is interesting. Very interesting. But, you know, time runs out, life happens. So if you can't find nobody in your own country, you go to another one, especially if you're leftovers. But in most Asian cultures, the leftover thing is pretty much the same, but it's more predominant in like China. I don't know about Japan, but it's more predominant in like China and Korea. And I know this because I work with both Korean and Chinese, but let's go.
I don't know exactly where in Vietnam she was from. She was diligent at home, and there were no signs she planned to leave. Reports say that most of these husbands came from poor families. They couldn't afford that 100,000.
Wait, so these people, these guys are getting ghosted by their wives. So, so not only could you not find a wife in your own country, but you got a wife from another country and they still left you. I mean, that's still bad, but
Yuan needed to marry a local bride, so they choose to marry Vietnamese women. In recent years, cases of Vietnamese brides running away have become frequent. This is especially true in cases involving black market marriage agencies.
black
These
market.
pose a significant risk, often leaving families with both financial and emotional losses. The fantasy of Vietnamese brides as gentle, hardworking, and not requiring a bride price has made marrying Vietnamese women a popular trend. In 2011, the Guangxi Public Security Department released data showing that over 40,000 undocumented Vietnamese brides were found in Guangxi alone. In other provinces, the number of Vietnamese brides were estimated to be over 65,000. This means that
Whoa,
at that time, there were more than 100,000 Vietnamese brides in China.
damn.
In broader areas like Guangxi, advertisements are even posted on utility poles. They say things like "Get married in 3 months guaranteed" or "Only 200,000 yuan." If you don't trust these street ads, there are professional matchmaking websites like Vietnam Cupid that offers similar services. The staff at these websites often use words like obedient and well behaved to describe these brides. They assure clients confidently saying, "We charge 3,000 yuan to arrange a meeting in Ho Chi Minh."
So to all the guys that say that they don't pay for box, when it comes to this tradition, you're paying. When you're marrying somebody, you are paying for box. So it's like you can't say that you ain't paying for box if this is what you have to go through to find a wife. Everyone's paying for box, whether you like it or not. You can have all the game you want in the world. You're paying for box. Now, see, the only good thing I can say about this is, well, I mean, this is a messed up situation, but let's say the Vietnamese woman left the Chinese man, took the kids, went back to Vietnam. There's a low chance that he has to pay child support. These are two different countries. They're not gonna work that shit out to make sure that the guy pays child support. Hell nah. Nobody ain't got time for that.
City. If the couple decides to get married, we charge an extra 36,000 yuan to organize the wedding, including wedding photos. If the bride files for divorce or runs away within 2 months, we will help you
Hey,
find
baby.
another partner. Meanwhile, remote villages in Vietnam are facing a crisis. Many young girls are disappearing. According to a BBC report, a 56-year-old woman named Doe.
So back in the day, this is in America. Fathers used to marry their daughters off to guys. They don't do that shit no more. This was way back in the old school. Now it's just whatever. Just think if it was still like that. We wouldn't be having half the problems that we have now with people.
Lives in a small Vietnamese village with only 50 people. She has a terminal illness. Her daughter Mi went missing 2 years ago. Mi was helping out in a market stall when she was followed by two men and then vanished. Locals believe Mi was taken to China and sold as a wife.
Damn.
Doe's only wish now is to see her daughter before she dies. Since Mi's disappearance, her sister-in-law has been living in fear. She forbids the women in her family from leaving the village alone. She herself only goes to the market with her husband. Every day she worries that human trafficking will one day affect her own daughter. Commentator Tang Jingyuan says that there are deeper reasons behind the trafficking of Vietnamese women. He believes that China's long-standing one-child policy forced many women to undergo abortions in rural areas where strong male labor is preferred. This led to a gender imbalance. Now there are more men than women, which has created demand for Vietnamese brides among older Chinese men. Tang Jingyuan also points out that China has an unprecedented level of social control, with surveillance cameras everywhere, yet large-scale crimes like human trafficking continues with little enforcement. He
It's too many people in China. They can't keep tabs of that. So the cameras are pointless. The surveillance is pointless. They can't keep up with everybody.
argues that the real reason is the government's priorities. China's control system focused mainly on suppressing religious groups, human rights activists, and dissidents, spending vast resources on this. When it comes to issues that affect people's daily lives, the police often turn a blind eye. In many places, the line between the police and criminal gangs is blurred. Corruption is widespread. The lucrative business of human trafficking and bride selling has attracted many corrupt police officers, organizing crime groups, and other criminals. Many government officials are involved, forming a massive network that keeps this illegal market thriving. The problem of Chinese men struggling to find wives is widespread. Vice President Yuan Xing of the China Population Association says China's 40-year-long gender imbalance at birth has led to many young men being forced into singlehood. Over 30 million Chinese men cannot find a wife.
Damn.
Yuan Xing notes that the lack of marriageable women for millions of Chinese men is a reality. The high male to female birth ratio has caused a mismatch in the population of marriageable age men and
Money,
women.
money, money,
This
money,
has led to
money.
social issues, including a marriage squeeze. Fewer marriages, the higher divorce rates. He stresses that addressing the gender imbalance in society is urgent. In normal circumstances, for every 100 girls born, there are 103 to 107 boys. This is the normal ratio worldwide. Since the 1980s, China's one-child policy has led to a steady increase in the number of boys being born compared to girls. In China's third nation census in 1982, the ratio reached 108.5 above the normal upper limit of 107. Since then, the ratio has continued to rise, peaking at 121.2 in 2004. The 2010 census showed a ratio of 118, far beyond the normal range of 103 to 107. A
Damn.
preference of boys is deeply ingrained in some parts of China's society. Under these conditions, a negative impact of the one-child policy has led to a gender imbalance in the population. In a 2011 report by the Financial Times, the number of newborn boys in China exceeded the number of girls by 20%. The 2010 census showed that China's male population exceeded the female population by 30.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up right here. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. And always, I'll catch you on the next episode. Hope you learned something, because I did.